In SASS, you have a lot of flexibility in how you can calculate different values. You can actually do so by utilizing math. SASS supports both integer and decimal numbers, both with and without units. So you could use something like 10 and also 10.5. SASS also supports pixels, ems, rems, percentages, any of the normal units of measurements that you're used to using. In SASS, you can use your standard operators like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. You can also use modulus, which gives you the remainder of a number. When units are present, SASS is going to preserve the units, which means that operations will only work when the units are the same or they're not present. I'll show you what this looks like in a file. Here's the page that we're going to be working on. It's a simple page, and what we're going to be focusing on is this area right here. Currently, I have the blue box, which is 100 pixels. It has a 0.5 em of margin around the outside. It's sitting inside a yellow box that is 300 pixels wide. Here's the HTML for our page. So you can see I have a div with a class of box wrap. That's my yellow box. And inside it sits my div with a class of box. That's the blue box. I've chosen to put my SASS in one file just to keep things easy. You can pause the video and scroll through if you want to know the specifics, but most of the styles are things that we've reused from previous lessons. The area that I want to bring your attention to is down here at the bottom. As you can see, I'm using the box wrap, which has a width of 300 pixels. I also am setting the background to yellow and a border color to the orange. The box div is displaying as inline block. It has a width of 100 pixels, a height of 100 pixels, and then it has margin and padding of 0.5 ems. I'm setting the background color to blue and the border to a darker shade of teal. The text color is set to a light white. So if we focus on our box, and here if we come to the width area, you can see that I am able to perform mathematical calculations. Now the subtraction operator need to be separated by a space so that SASS knows that this indicates minus and not a negative 50. If I save right now and we go look in the browser, when I refresh, you can see that my blue box becomes half as wide as it was before. Conversely, if I change this to a plus and we save and look at it in the browser, now the box is going to become 150 pixels wide. It is worth noting that I just added the 50 to the 100 pixels. You can see that it was not necessary for me to add the px. If I did add the px, it wouldn't hurt. That would still work fine. But if I changed this and added something like 2 ems and tried to save, you can see that SASS is going to give me an error. So it's letting me know that I have incompatible units. The em and the pixels don't mesh. We also have the ability to do multiplication. So if I use the asterisk and multiply 100 pixels by 2, my box is now going to be twice as wide. So it's going to be 200 pixels wide. And then I have the option to do division. So here, if I divide 2 into 100 pixels, it's going to go ahead and make this 50 pixels wide. Now let me show you something that's particular to division. Here I'm going to create a variable called mynum. I'm going to set this to be equal to 100 pixels. I'm going to come into my width area and I'm going to replace my 100 pixels with my new variable of mynum. We'll multiply this by 2. This should give us a box that is 200 pixels wide. If I refresh, you can now see that the box is 200 pixels wide. So it's calculating the math that we specified in the SASS file. Let me show you something that's particular to division. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to declare my font size. So I'll declare the font size to be 20 pixels, and I'm going to set my line height to 1.5. Then I'm going to specify that I want the font family to be sans serif. So this is standard shorthand notation where you have to declare both the font family and the font size, and then we're also adding on line height as an optional value. If I refresh here, you can see that the size of the text has changed. Here's my CSS that's being calculated. You can see that the font is doing 20 pixels slash 1.5. So it is actually not performing a division-like calculation. Let's adjust our margin using our variable and division operator. I'm going to use my num. I'm going to divide by 10, which should give us 10 pixels. If we save and we refresh, you can see that my margin is now set to 10 pixels. So it actually is performing the calculation as we would expect. You can even use more sophisticated math. For the padding, let's perform a mathematical calculation here as well. I'm going to set my padding to 20 pixels. I'm going to add this to 10 divided by 5. So the result should be 22 pixels for the padding. If we refresh here, you can see how things have moved around and our padding is indeed 22 pixels. Just like when you're doing standard math, the order of operations is respected. So first it's going to perform any division and or multiplication, and then it'll do the addition and subtraction. If I had spacing in between the division sign, we're still going to get the exact same results. The spacing doesn't matter in this case. In the padding, if we wanted the 20 pixels to be added to the 10 pixels before it was divided by 5, we would need to use parentheses. So this is just like what you would normally do in math. Now it's going to add this, which is going to give us 30. It's going to divide by 5, which should result in padding of 6 pixels. If I refresh, it's giving me a warning and not calculating. And the reason why is because I think I have this pixels on the end. If we just remove the pixels here, so now it will divide the sum of 20 and 30 by 5. That's going to give us the correct 6 pixels. So keep in mind that you can use parentheses to affect the order of operations. The other thing that I want to mention is that sometimes you're going to need to include interpolation. So if I create a couple more variables, I'm going to create one for font size and line height. And here, if I replace these numbers with our new variables, if I save and we go look in the browser, you're going to see that it's going to calculate the division for us. So here, my font size is being set to 13.333. It is no longer using the font size value and the line height value. It's dividing these. What's happening here is sometimes the variable behavior isn't doing what you want. When this happens, you're going to use interpolation. Interpolation is simply a way to use the value of a variable as part of the name of a selector or property. The variable is defined in the same way, but when we reference it, we use a different syntax. To reference our variables here, we're going to wrap them inside of curly braces and use a number sign. So in front of font size, I'm going to use hash curly brace, and then I'll put the name font size. I'll close the curly brace. I'm going to use my division sign of /, and then I'm going to use hash curly brace, and I'll use line height, and then I'll put my curly brace in there again. If we save now and we refresh, I want you to keep your eye on our font value. Now, I accidentally took off my E, so let me put that back on, and if I refresh now, you can see that our font is being rendered in the way that we want. So now we get the 20 pixels and the 1.5 line height instead of performing division on these two items. So do keep that in mind, that sometimes when you use variables, you may need to include interpolation so that the behavior works correctly. This gives you an idea of how you can use some of the basic mathematical operations inside of your CSS. It's really easy when you use it in conjunction with SASS, and it gives you a lot of flexibility.